I'd been planning our 10-year anniversary trip for months. I wanted everything to be perfect, like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of perfect. The kind of trip you look back on and think, yeah, that was the moment our marriage went to the next level. We'd been through a lot together: careers, buying our first house, and dealing with life's regular ups and downs. We were solid, or at least that's what I thought. I booked us a beautiful cabin by the lake. It was secluded, peaceful, and had that cozy retreat from the world vibe. I knew she'd love it, especially since the last couple of years had been stressful for both of us. Between work and trying, and failing, to have kids, it felt like we were stuck in this endless loop of stress and frustration. This trip was supposed to break us out of that rut. At least, that was the plan. We left on a Friday afternoon. She seemed excited, genuinely. I mean, she'd been talking about needing a vacation for months, and I figured this would be perfect. The drive was long, but we spent it laughing, listening to old music from our college days, and just talking. I started feeling like this was it, the turning point. Things were going to be different after this trip. They had to be. We got to the cabin just before sunset. I wish I could show you the view, man. It was incredible. The lake shimmered under the fading sunlight, and the trees surrounding the cabin made it feel like we were in our own little world. I'd planned the entire weekend: fancy dinner that night, a boat ride the next day, a hike, and then some wine by the fire pit. It was a picture-perfect plan, right? Except, it wasn't. That first night, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. She seemed a little distracted, constantly checking her phone. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but this was supposed to be our time. Just the two of us. I chalked it up to her needing to tie up loose ends from work or something. She's always been the type to carry her work stress into personal time. I didn't push. We had dinner, steaks, a bottle of her favorite wine, and I thought things would loosen up, but she stayed glued to that damn phone. Texting, scrolling, whatever. I tried to laugh it off, teasing her about not being able to disconnect, but she gave me one of those half-hearted laughs and said she was just checking in on something for work. Alright, fair enough. But here's the thing: after dinner, I noticed her getting a little jittery. Like, every time her phone buzzed, she'd glance at it, type something quickly, and put it face down. By now, I'm getting curious, but again, it's our anniversary weekend, so I didn't want to ruin the vibe by making it a thing. I let it go. Later that night, while we were sitting by the fire, she excused herself to go to the bathroom. I was tipsy from the wine, so I didn't think twice. She took her phone with her, though. It was weird. Like, who does that when you're just going to the bathroom, right? But I wasn't trying to be paranoid. I trusted her. But trust has a funny way of fading when things don't add up. She was gone for like 15 minutes. When she came back, I asked if everything was okay. She just brushed it off, saying she got caught up looking at some emails and apologized for being distracted. I accepted it, but something in my gut didn't sit right. I'm not one to be suspicious, but that night, I couldn't help but notice she was acting different. When we went to bed, she fell asleep almost immediately, but I couldn't. I kept replaying everything in my head: her phone, her disappearing for so long, the way she was acting. Was I just being insecure, or was something really going on? That's when I noticed it. Her phone was still on her side of the bed, the screen lighting up every few minutes with new notifications. I wasn't trying to snoop, but come on, it's hard to ignore when it's lighting up like a Christmas tree. I kept glancing over, and finally, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed her phone, planning to just peek at the notifications. Maybe it really was work stuff, and I was overthinking. I wish I had been. Because that's when I saw it, a text from someone named Jay. It wasn't work. And it wasn't innocent. My heart sank. This wasn't just my imagination running wild. Something was definitely going on. I didn't open the message thread right away. I sat there, staring at her phone, my mind racing. What the hell was happening? This was supposed to be our anniversary trip. We were supposed to reconnect, not whatever this was. I had a decision to make. Do I open it and see what's really going on, or do I let it slide and confront her later? Either way, I knew things were about to get messy. So, there I was, sitting in the dark with her phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over that notification. Jay, who the hell was Jay? Everything inside me screamed that I should just put the phone down, pretend I didn't see anything. But you know that feeling, right? Once doubt creeps in, it doesn't just go away. It sits there, eating at you until you do something about it. I opened the message thread. The texts between her and this Jay weren't recent, like not from that day at least. But as I scrolled back through their conversation, I realized this had been going on for a while. Weeks, maybe even months. The messages were casual at first, nothing too alarming. But the more I read, the more it started to unravel. Flirty comments, inside jokes I didn't understand, and then, there were pictures. Yeah, those kinds of pictures. Not full-on explicit, but enough to make me feel like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I'd spent the last decade with, was having some kind of thing with this guy. It didn't take long to connect the dots. I sat there, my heart pounding, staring at the screen, completely numb. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to wake her up, throw the phone in her face, and demand an explanation. But part of me didn't want to deal with the truth yet. Not here, not in this cabin where I'd poured my heart into making this the perfect anniversary trip. It felt like the whole thing was crumbling right in front of me, and I didn't know how to stop it. Instead of confronting her, I did something I'm not proud of. I kept reading. The texts had gone from flirty banter to something more. They talked about meeting up, shared I miss you messages, and even reminisced about a weekend they'd spent together. I was shaking at this point. I mean, what the actual hell? When? Where? How had I not seen this before? It was like my whole reality had been flipped upside down in the span of 10 minutes. There was one message that stood out. It was from just a few days before we left for the trip. Jay had texted her, asking, "Are you sure you can handle this trip? I know you said things are weird with him. Don't feel guilty." And her response, her damn response. "I'll be fine. He's clueless, and we need this. I'll see you when I get back." Clueless. That word hit me harder than anything else. She thought I was clueless. She was sitting next to me, laughing, smiling, acting like everything was normal, and she thought I had no idea. And I guess, until that moment, she was right. I had no idea. I couldn't sleep after that. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? And why? Was it something I did? Was I not enough? The questions kept piling up, and none of them had answers. Not yet, anyway. The next morning, she woke up like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, smiled, and said, "Morning, babe. Did you sleep okay?" I just mumbled something about having a rough night, trying to keep my emotions in check. I didn't want to blow up yet. I needed more time to figure out how I was going to handle this. We spent the day doing all the things I had planned, boating, hiking, trying to enjoy the beautiful weather. But everything felt different now. Every time she laughed or smiled, it felt fake, like I was seeing a version of her that wasn't real. I kept wondering if she was thinking about him, if she was wishing she was with him instead of me. It was hard to even look at her. Every time I did, all I could think about was those texts, those pictures, and that one damn word, clueless. That night, we had dinner by the fire pit again, and she seemed more relaxed. Maybe she thought the trip was working, that we were getting back on track. Little did she know, I was a wreck inside. Every time her phone buzzed, I tensed up, wondering if it was him again, wondering if she was still lying to my face. After dinner, she poured us both a glass of wine, and we sat there in silence for a while, watching the fire. I tried to pretend like everything was normal, but the weight of what I knew was crushing me. I had to say something, but I didn't know how to start. How do you even begin that conversation? "Hey, by the way, I know you're cheating on me, and I found out because you're bad at hiding your texts." Instead, I just asked her something simple: "Are you happy?" She looked at me, kind of surprised, and said, "Of course I am." "Why would you ask that?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I don't know. Just feels like we've been a little off lately. Thought maybe this trip would help, but..." She interrupted me before I could finish. "It's just been a rough couple of years, you know? With everything going on, work, the house, everything. But I'm happy. I'm really glad we did this." She smiled at me then, and for a split second, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that maybe I was just overreacting. But I knew better. That smile was a mask, and behind it was someone who wasn't telling me the whole truth. I didn't push it any further that night. I needed more time, more clarity. I had to figure out how to confront her without everything exploding in my face. But one thing was clear: this wasn't the trip I'd planned. This wasn't the anniversary celebration I'd dreamed of. It was the beginning of the end, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face what came next. The next morning, everything just felt heavier. She was acting all normal, like we were just a couple on a relaxing getaway, but I was stuck in my own head. It's wild how quickly things can change. Just 2 days ago, I was excited, happy, even looking forward to spending some uninterrupted time with her. Now, every smile she gave felt like a lie. I still hadn't said anything. I kept telling myself to wait for the right moment, but that moment never seemed to come. We had one more day left in the cabin, and I didn't want to ruin it. But let's be real, it was already ruined, wasn't it? No matter what we did, no matter how hard I tried to enjoy the trip, all I could think about was Jay. Who was he? What did he have that I didn't? She went out for a walk in the afternoon, saying she wanted to take in the scenery. Normally, I would have gone with her, but I needed space. I needed time to think about what I was going to do. So, while she was gone, I did the only thing I could think of: I picked up her phone again. I know. It's a messed up thing to do. But when you're that deep into suspicion, it's like an itch you can't scratch. I had to know more. I scrolled through the texts again, this time digging deeper, searching for anything that would tell me who this guy was. I finally found his full name in one of the texts, and a quick social media search led me straight to him. He wasn't anything special. Just some guy from her gym, of all places. A few years younger than us, decent looking, but nothing that screamed affair material. But then again, who am I to say? Maybe that's exactly why she was into him. Someone who wasn't weighed down by the stress of bills, a mortgage, and failed pregnancy tests. Someone free. I hated him. I hated that he existed, that he'd been sharing moments with my wife that should have been mine. But most of all, I hated that she let it happen. While I was scrolling, a new message came in from Jay. It was simple: just, "Missing you today. Wish you were here instead." I felt sick. Here we were, on what was supposed to be a romantic getaway, and she was still texting this guy. Still thinking about him. I put the phone down before I did something stupid, like throw it into the lake. When she came back from her walk, I could barely look at her. She sat down next to me on the porch and started talking about how peaceful the forest was, how much she was enjoying the trip. She even made a comment about wanting to come back next year. The nerve of her, acting like everything was fine while she was sneaking around behind my back. I stayed quiet for most of the evening, barely saying more than a few words. She noticed, of course, but I blamed it on being tired from the hike earlier. Inside, though, I was raging. My mind was spinning with everything I wanted to say, everything I wanted to scream at her. But I kept it all in. I didn't know why. Maybe because a part of me still couldn't believe it was real. Maybe I was hoping she'd come clean on her own. Maybe I was just scared of what would happen if I opened that door. That night, after we went to bed, I couldn't take it anymore. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, while she slept soundly next to me. How could she sleep so easily? How could she not feel the weight of what she was doing? I turned over and looked at her, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, and I realized I had no idea who she really was anymore. "Are you happy?" I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. It was the same question I'd asked her by the fire the night before, but this time, I needed a real answer. I needed to know if any of this was real, or if our entire relationship had been built on a lie. She stirred a little, half asleep, and mumbled something about being tired. I didn't push it. I just turned back over and stared at the ceiling again, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The next day, we packed up to head home. The drive back was brutal. Hours of silence, broken only by small talk about the trip and how we should do this again soon. I nodded, agreeing with her, even though I knew there was no way in hell we'd ever come back here. Not after what I knew. Not after what I'd seen. When we got home, she went to unpack, and I sat down in the living room, feeling completely drained. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. So, I called her into the room and just blurted it out, "Who's Jay?" She froze, standing there in the doorway, her face turning pale. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her hands started shaking as she clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. For a split second, I thought she might lie, come up with some story to explain it all away. But she didn't. Instead, she sat down on the couch across from me, her eyes welling up with tears. And that's when she said the words I'd been dreading. I didn't mean for it to happen. I just stared at her, waiting for more, waiting for some kind of explanation that would make sense of all this. But what explanation could there possibly be? She started talking, but honestly, I don't even remember half of what she said. Something about how we'd grown distant, how she felt like we weren't connecting anymore, how this guy had just been there for her at the right time. Blah, blah, blah. It was the same tired story you hear 1,000 times from people who cheat. Like, seriously? That's it? That's your reason for throwing away 10 years of marriage? I asked her if she loved him. She said no, of course not, that it was just a fling, something she got caught up in but didn't mean anything. But how could I believe her? How could I believe anything she said after this? The worst part is, she didn't even seem sorry. Sure, she cried and apologized, but it felt more like she was sorry she got caught, not sorry for what she did. And that's what broke me. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just sat there, completely numb, while she tried to explain away months of betrayal like it was some minor mistake. That's when I realized it was over. Not just our trip. Not just our anniversary. Our marriage. Everything. I sat there on the couch, numb, while she kept talking, trying to explain herself. Her words sounded distant, like they were coming through a fog. It was all so cliché, I didn't mean for it to happen, it didn't mean anything, I still love you. But nothing she said made a difference. The damage was done. The more she talked, the more I realized she wasn't apologizing for cheating, she was apologizing because she got caught. There was a difference, and I could feel it in the way she was trying to make herself the victim. Like, somehow, I had driven her to this. She said something about how our marriage had changed, how I wasn't as attentive as I used to be, and how she felt lonely. But guess what? I was lonely, too. We both were. But I didn't go looking for comfort in someone else's bed. I tried to work through it, to fix things, to make our life better. This trip was supposed to be part of that. And now, all I could think was how much of a joke it had all been. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just let her talk, watched her cry, trying to decide what my next move would be. A part of me wanted to get up and leave right then and there. Just walk out and never look back. But that felt too easy. Like, after everything we'd been through, I needed more. I needed her to understand just how badly she had screwed everything up. But that wasn't going to happen. Not the way I wanted, anyway. Eventually, she ran out of things to say. She just sat there, staring at me with those teary eyes, waiting for me to forgive her. But I didn't have it in me. I couldn't even look at her. All I saw was betrayal, over and over again, like it was on a loop in my mind. So what now? I finally asked. It was the only thing I could think to say. What happens next? Where do we go from here? I don't know, she whispered. I want to fix this, though. I want us to work through it. Work through it? She really thought we could just slap a band-aid on this and keep going like nothing happened? I couldn't believe it. She actually thought we could save this. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no coming back from this. Not for me, at least. You need to tell me everything, I said, trying to stay calm, though my insides were boiling. How long has this been going on? How many times did you see him? She hesitated, looking down at the floor, which told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This had been going on for a while. About 6 months, she finally said, barely above a whisper. We only met a few times, maybe 4 or 5. But it wasn't serious. I swear, it was just... I don't know. I was confused. 6 months. 6 months of lies. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. Yelling wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't make the hurt go away. I asked her if it was over, and she swore up and down that it was, that she hadn't seen him in weeks, and that she blocked him after we left for the trip. But could I believe her? Could I trust anything she said anymore? She was good at lying. She'd been lying to me for months, and I had no way of knowing if she was telling the truth now. I need space, I finally said, standing up. I couldn't be in that room with her anymore. I needed to get out, to clear my head, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. Please don't go, she begged, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away. I couldn't handle her touch right now. It made my skin crawl, knowing that those same hands had been all over him. I'm not leaving, I said. But I need space. I can't be near you right now. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door without looking back, even though I could hear her crying behind me. I didn't have a plan, I didn't know where I was going, but I just had to get out of there. I needed air, space, anything that wasn't her. I ended up driving around aimlessly for hours. My mind was racing, replaying everything she had said, everything I had seen. The texts, the lies, the way she had acted like everything was normal. How could she do this to me? How could she do this to us? I parked by the lake, the same one where we'd spend our anniversary weekend, and just sat there, staring at the water. It was so calm, so peaceful, and I hated it. It felt like the world was mocking me, like everything else could just keep going while my life was falling apart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, punch something, do anything to release the anger boiling inside me. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the water, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but I wasn't ready to go there yet. I mean, we had been together for 10 years. 10 years of memories, of building a life together. Could I really throw that all away? But then again, hadn't she already done that? She had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Was there even anything left to save? After what felt like hours, I finally headed back home. The house was dark when I walked in, and she was already in bed. I didn't go into the bedroom, though. I crashed on the couch, too exhausted to even think straight. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind wouldn't shut off, the questions swirling around endlessly. Could I forgive her? Could I live with this? Or was it already over, and I was just delaying the inevitable? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my back aching and my mind still foggy from the mess of emotions I'd been drowning in all night. I hadn't gotten a wink of sleep, and every muscle in my body felt tense, like I'd been fighting an invisible war while laying there. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, trying to be quiet. Maybe she thought I was still asleep, or maybe she just didn't know how to act around me anymore. Honestly, I didn't know how to act around her either. After a few minutes of debating whether or not to confront her, I finally got up and walked into the kitchen. She was making coffee, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying all night. The tension between us was thick, almost suffocating. I didn't say anything, I just poured myself a cup and sat down at the table, staring into the dark liquid like it had all the answers. "Do you want to talk?" she asked after a long, awkward silence, her voice barely above a whisper. Did I want to talk? Hell, I didn't even know anymore. Part of me just wanted to pack my bags and leave, pretend like this was all a bad dream. But the other part of me, the part that had spent 10 years with her, that had shared countless memories, that had built a life together, wanted answers. I needed to understand how we'd ended up here, in this broken mess. "I don't even know what to say," I finally replied, my voice sounding as tired as I felt. "How do you even begin to talk about something like this?" She sat down across from me, biting her lip like she was struggling to find the right words. "I know I messed up," she said quietly. "I know I hurt you, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose what we have." I let out a bitter laugh. "What we have? Do we even have anything anymore?" She flinched at that, her eyes filling with tears again. I hated seeing her cry, but I couldn't stop the anger boiling up inside me. I had given her everything, trusted her completely, and she had thrown it all away for some random guy she barely knew. And now she wanted me to believe that we could just fix this? That we could go back to the way things were? "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "But I want to try. I love you." That word. Love. It used to mean everything to me, but now it felt hollow. How could she say she loved me when she had been sneaking around with someone else for months? Was love even real anymore, or was it just another lie? "Do you even know what love is?" I asked, my voice cold, harsher than I intended. "Because it sure doesn't feel like it." She looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "I do love you. I swear, I do. I don't know. I was in a bad place, and I made a terrible mistake. But that doesn't mean I don't love you." I shook my head, not buying it. "A mistake? A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. What you did. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. You chose to betray me. Over and over again. And now you expect me to just believe that you still love me?" Her lip quivered, and she looked like she was about to break down again. "I don't expect anything," she whispered. I just want a chance to make things right." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I didn't think anything could make this right. Nothing she could say or do would erase what had happened. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces, and I didn't know if it could ever be put back together. After what felt like forever, I finally stood up from the table. "I need some time to think," I said, my voice flat. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." I could see the fear in her eyes, the panic setting in as she realized that I wasn't just bluffing. But I couldn't stay in that house, in that toxic bubble of lies and half-hearted apologies. I needed space. I needed to breathe. Without another word, I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. The crisp morning air hit me like a wake-up call, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could actually think clearly. I didn't have a plan. I just started walking, my feet carrying me aimlessly through the neighborhood, past the houses with their perfect lawns and happy families. It felt like I was on the outside looking in, like I was watching some version of life I used to know but didn't belong to anymore. I found myself sitting at a nearby park, watching the kids play on the swings, their laughter ringing through the air. It was surreal. Life was still going on around me, while mine was falling apart. I thought about our life together, everything we'd been through, all the highs and lows, the good times, and the struggles. We weren't perfect, but who is? We'd always managed to work through things before, but this? This felt different. It felt final. Could I really forgive her? Could I ever look at her the same way again? And even if I did, would I ever be able to trust her? Hours passed as I sat there, lost in my thoughts, and by the time I finally headed home, the sun was starting to set. When I walked in the door, she was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes red and puffy from crying all day. She didn't say anything as I walked past her and into the bedroom. I could feel the weight of her eyes on me, but I couldn't meet her gaze. I grabbed some clothes and headed for the guest room. I needed space, and I wasn't ready to sleep in the same bed as her. Not yet. That night, lying alone in the guest room, I felt the full weight of everything come crashing down on me. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, it all hit me at once. I thought about everything she'd said, how she wanted to fix things, how she still loved me. But love wasn't enough. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind made up. I walked into the kitchen where she was sitting, sipping her coffee, looking like she hadn't slept at all. I took a deep breath, feeling the heaviness of what I was about to say. "I think we need to separate," I said, my voice steady but low. Her face crumbled, and I could see the pain in her eyes, but I didn't back down. It was the only choice I had left. I half expected her to argue, to beg me to reconsider, but she didn't. She just sat there, staring at me with wide, red-rimmed eyes, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing holding her together. "Are you sure?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. It was like she was afraid to hear the answer, afraid of what I might say next. Was I sure? I don't know. I mean, how could you ever be 100% sure about something like this? It wasn't as simple as saying, "I'm done." We'd built an entire life together, 10 years of love, memories, struggles, and victories. It wasn't something you could walk away from easily. But at the same time, I couldn't see any other way forward. Not after what she'd done. Not after how she'd shattered everything I thought we had. "I need time," I said, my voice firm but not angry. "Time away from all this. I can't be here, pretending like everything's okay when it's not." She nodded slowly, her tears falling silently onto the table. She didn't try to stop me, didn't try to argue or convince me to stay. It was almost like she knew this was inevitable. Like she'd been preparing herself for it, even before I said the words. We spent the next hour talking logistics, who would stay in the house, what to tell our families, how to handle everything that came with the mess we were now in. It was cold and clinical, almost like we were discussing a business arrangement instead of the end of our marriage. But that's what it had become, hadn't it? A series of transactions, decisions to be made, things to be divided. In the end, we agreed that I would move out temporarily. I didn't want to leave the house, it was my home, too, but I couldn't stay there with her. Not now. Not when every room, every piece of furniture, every photograph on the wall felt like a reminder of the lies she'd told and the trust she'd broken. So, I packed a bag. Just the essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop. As I stuffed my belongings into a duffel, I realized how little I was taking with me. It felt wrong, like I was leaving behind everything that mattered, but I told myself it was just temporary. I needed space to think, to figure out if this marriage was worth saving, or if it was already too far gone. She stood in the doorway, watching me pack, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I could see the regret written all over her face, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made it worse. Because part of me still loved her. Part of me still wanted to believe that we could fix this. But that part was shrinking, being slowly drowned out by the anger and betrayal. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was there to say? Her words felt empty, meaningless. Sorry didn't fix this. Sorry didn't change what she'd done. I grabbed my bag and walked past her without looking back. I could hear her crying softly behind me, but I forced myself to keep walking, my feet heavy with each step. I had to leave. I had to get out of that house before I broke down and let her pull me back into the mess we were in. I ended up staying at a friend's place for a few nights. He didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a beer and told me I could crash on his couch for as long as I needed. I appreciated that. I wasn't ready to talk about everything yet, and honestly, I didn't even know where to begin. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell someone that your wife, the person you thought was your forever, betrayed you? For those few days, I tried to distract myself. I went to work, hung out with my friend, watched mindless TV, anything to avoid thinking about her, about the situation. But it was impossible to escape. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her voice. Every text that came in made my stomach flip, wondering if it was her, wondering what she might say. She texted me a few times, short messages asking how I was, telling me she missed me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I needed distance. I needed to clear my head before I could even think about talking to her again. After about a week, I realized I couldn't keep running. I couldn't hide out on my friend's couch forever. I had to face this, had to make a decision about what came next. So, I reached out to her and told her we needed to meet, to talk. We agreed to meet at a cafe, neutral ground. I didn't want to go back to the house yet, and I didn't want to be in a public place where we might make a scene. I just wanted to talk, to figure out where we stood. When I got there, she was already waiting, looking smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were tired, her hair pulled back into a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing makeup, which was rare for her. She looked broken. And for a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if maybe I was being too harsh. But then I remembered what she had done, and the guilt faded. We sat down, ordered coffee, and for a while, neither of us said anything. It was like we didn't know how to start, how to dive into the mess of emotions swirling between us. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I know I need help, and I'm trying to understand why I did what I did." That took me by surprise. She hadn't mentioned therapy before, and for the first time since everything had happened, I saw a flicker of something, maybe hope, that maybe, just maybe, she was serious about trying to fix things. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. "I don't know if I can ever get past this," I admitted, staring into my coffee cup. "I don't know if I can trust you again." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I love you, and I want to fight for us." Those words, "fight for us," echoed in my head. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to fight too. But the other part of me, the part that was still raw from the betrayal, wasn't so sure. "I need time," I said again, my voice shaky. "I don't know what I want yet. I need more time." She nodded again, wiping her eyes. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need." We sat there for a while longer, talking in circles, not really getting anywhere but not quite ready to walk away either. It felt like we were both waiting for something, some kind of sign, some kind of clarity that would tell us what to do next. When we finally left the cafe, I still didn't have any answers. But one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Not yet. The days after our meeting at the cafe were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. I was in limbo, stuck between wanting to move forward with my life and still feeling tethered to the mess my wife had left behind. She had been texting me regularly, nothing too pushy, just little check-ins, letting me know she was thinking of me. And honestly, I didn't know how to feel about it. Part of me wanted her to stop, to just let me breathe, but another part of me, well, it didn't hate hearing from her. I started staying at a cheap motel after leaving my friend's place. It wasn't glamorous, but I needed space. The hum of the highway outside my window became this weirdly comforting background noise. My nights were spent lying on a lumpy bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few months in my head, trying to make sense of it all. How had we gotten here? How had I missed all the signs? The truth was, there had been signs. Subtle ones, little things that I had brushed off at the time. She had started working late more often, claiming there was a big project at work. I noticed she was on her phone more, always quick to lock it when I walked into the room. There were times when her affection seemed forced, like she was going through the motions rather than actually feeling anything. But I didn't question it. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. And now, I regretted every moment I'd let slip by without asking questions. One night, I decided to go back to the house. I told myself it was just to grab some more clothes, but deep down, I knew I was looking for something else. Maybe closure. Maybe answers. Or maybe I just wanted to see her. It had been a week since our meeting, and I had spent every day since thinking about whether or not we had any chance of fixing this. When I got to the house, it was dark. Her car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home, but the place felt empty. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, half expecting her to greet me. But there was no sound, no movement. I went upstairs, to our bedroom. The bed was unmade, clothes scattered on the floor. It was a mess, but not the kind of mess that suggested anything unusual. Just life, I guess. But as I was about to leave the room, something caught my eye. Her phone. It was sitting on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with a notification. I wasn't planning to snoop, but the name on the notification froze me in place. It was him. I felt a cold wave of nausea wash over me as I stared at the name. Adam. The guy she had been cheating on me with. It was like a punch to the gut, and I could feel the anger bubbling up again, the betrayal slamming into me all over. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed her phone and opened the message. Adam, miss you. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the conversation. It was recent. They had still been talking after everything. After she swore she was trying to make things right, she was still in contact with him. The messages weren't explicit, nothing that screamed affair, but they were enough. Flirty, casual, like they were old friends catching up. But the undertone was clear. This wasn't over for them. She had lied to me. Again. I felt my whole world collapse. Again. It was like a bad movie I couldn't stop watching, stuck on repeat. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. And here I was, standing in the middle of the wreckage, wondering how the hell I'd ever thought things might get better. I put the phone down and walked out of the bedroom, my vision blurry with anger. I didn't even grab my clothes. I just left, slamming the door behind me. I got in my car and drove, my mind racing, my thoughts spiraling out of control. How could she? After everything we'd been through, after the mess we'd made of our lives, how could she still be talking to him? What was she expecting? That I would just roll over and let her have her cake and eat it too? I wasn't that guy. Not anymore. I drove for hours, not really caring where I was going, just needing to be anywhere but there. I ended up at a bar on the outskirts of town, a rundown dive where nobody knew my name and nobody cared. I needed a drink, something to numb the pain. The bartender didn't ask questions, he just poured me a shot of whiskey, followed by another. And another. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at my drink, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. The anger. The betrayal. The loss. It was too much. I didn't know how to handle it all, so I just let the whiskey do the work, drowning my emotions in a sea of alcohol. I don't remember much of that night. At some point, I must have stumbled out of the bar and found my way back to the motel. When I woke up the next morning, my head was pounding, my mouth dry, and my phone was blowing up with texts from her. Where are you? I'm worried about you. Please talk to me. I couldn't deal with it. Not yet. So, I ignored the messages and threw my phone on the bed, rolling over and pulling the covers over my head like a kid hiding from monsters. Only this time, the monsters were real. And they were living in my house, in my life. I spent the next few days in a fog. I didn't go to work. I didn't talk to anyone. I just existed, floating in this weird, numb space where nothing felt real. It was like my life had been ripped apart, and now I was standing in the rubble, unsure of what to do next. Eventually, I knew I had to face her. I couldn't avoid it forever, and honestly, I was tired of running. I texted her, told her I'd be by the house later that day. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew we needed to talk. Really talk this time. No more lies. No more pretending. When I got to the house, she was waiting for me in the living room, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. I could see that she knew. She knew I had seen the messages. I can explain, she started, but I cut her off. I don't want explanations, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I want the truth. All of it. No more lies. No more excuses. I deserve that much. She stared at me, tears welling up in her eyes, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then she hesitated, her lip quivering as she tried to find the right words. And that was all the answer I needed. "You're still talking to him," I said, my voice cracking. "After everything, you're still in touch with him. How could you do that?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I wasn't. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore." I had given her every chance to come clean, to be honest, and she had failed. Again. "I'm done," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't do this anymore." She broke down, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. I was too far gone, too broken to fix anything now. As I walked out the door, I felt an overwhelming sense of finality. This was it. The end of us. Walking out of that house felt like shedding a second skin. It was surreal, like a part of me had stayed behind in that room, standing next to her while she sobbed, while I walked into whatever was left of my future. I thought I'd feel relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but instead, all I felt was emptiness. This gaping hole inside of me that I wasn't sure would ever close. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying every moment over in my head. Every lie, every excuse she'd made, and every time I'd been dumb enough to believe her. What was I even doing? Who was I without her? Without the marriage? The truth was, I didn't know. I had built my whole identity around us, around the idea that we were solid. And now that it was gone, I felt like a stranger to myself. Eventually, I ended up at a park. One of those quiet, out-of-the-way places where people go when they don't want to be found. I sat on a bench, staring out at a playground where a few kids were running around, their laughter echoing in the distance. It was strange, seeing life go on so normally when everything in my world had fallen apart. I sat there for a while, letting the cold wind numb my face, letting my mind wander to places I hadn't let it go before. Places where I wasn't angry, or bitter, or hurt, but just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of feeling like I was in this endless loop of pain. I didn't want to keep holding on to the anger. It wasn't serving me anymore. It was just keeping me stuck in the past. As the sky started to darken, I made a decision. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life haunted by her, by what she'd done. I wasn't going to let this define me. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. It was time to start over, to rebuild myself from the ground up. I got back in my car and drove to a lawyer's office the next day. It was a small, no-frills kind of place, but it got the job done. Filing for divorce wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. The lawyer explained the process in clear, clinical terms, and I nodded along, feeling a strange sense of detachment. Like I was watching someone else's life unfold. It wasn't until I signed the papers that it hit me. This was real. This was happening. My marriage was officially over. I walked out of that office feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The finality of it all was crushing, but there was also a sense of freedom in it. Like I could finally breathe again after being suffocated for so long. Over the next few weeks, I began the slow process of picking up the pieces. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, nothing fancy but enough for me. It was quiet, and the solitude was both comforting and maddening. I had too much time to think, too much time to replay every what-if scenario in my head. What if I had confronted her earlier? What if I had been a better husband? What if I had seen the signs sooner? But none of that mattered anymore. The past was the past, and there was no changing it. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the silence that filled my new place. But no matter how hard I tried, the thoughts of her and what she had done still crept in, like an unwanted guest that refused to leave. I found myself wondering what she was doing, how she was handling all of this. Was she still seeing him? Did she even care that our marriage had ended? I told myself it didn't matter. But the truth was, it did. It mattered more than I wanted to admit. About a month after filing for divorce, I got a text from her. Just one sentence. "Can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat when I saw her name pop up on my screen. I hadn't heard from her since the day I left. I thought I had made it clear that there was nothing left to say, but apparently, she hadn't gotten the memo. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete it and move on. But another part of me, maybe the part that still had hope, no matter how small, couldn't resist. Against my better judgment, I typed out a response. "About what?" Her reply came quickly. "Please. Just give me a chance to explain." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Explain? What more could there be to explain? She had cheated. She had lied. And she had destroyed our marriage in the process. What more could she possibly say to make any of that better? But curiosity got the better of me, and before I knew it, I was agreeing to meet her. We decided on a neutral spot again, the same cafe where we had met last time. When I walked in, I saw her sitting at the same table, looking as nervous as I felt. She hadn't changed much, still beautiful, still the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But now, there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. A wall that I wasn't sure could ever be torn down. I sat down across from her, not saying anything at first. I wanted her to speak, to say whatever it was that had brought us back to this point. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them on the table in front of her. "I know you don't owe me anything," she began, her voice soft, "but I need you to understand. I never stopped loving you." I stared at her, my heart sinking. Was this what she had called me here for? To throw out another line about love? I had heard it all before. The apologies, the promises to change. It didn't mean anything anymore. She seemed to sense my skepticism and rushed to continue. "I made a huge mistake," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know that. And I know I hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I'm getting help. I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to figure out why I did what I did. I want to be better. For you." I shook my head, leaning back in my chair. "It's too late for that." Her tears fell freely now, and I could see the pain etched on her face. But I couldn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. "I know," she whispered. "I know it's too late. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, but it didn't matter. Not now. Maybe once, a long time ago, those words would have meant something. But now, they were just words. "I don't know what you expect from me," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choices. And now, I'm making mine." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I understand. I needed you to hear me. One last time." I stood up, feeling the finality of the moment settle in. This was it. The real end. "I heard you," I said quietly. "Goodbye." And with that, I walked out of the cafe, not looking back. This time, there was no hesitation, no second thoughts. It was over. The story ends here, with no neat bow to tie it all together, no fairy tale ending where everything works out. That's life, though. It's messy. It's complicated. Sometimes, things don't get fixed. Sometimes, they stay broken. But you move on. You rebuild. You find a way to live again, even when you think you can't. And that's what I'll do. One step at a time.